In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Good evening, welcome. We're continuing exploration of whatever the heck the view is in the Buddhist tradition, since it keeps changing. Everybody's got a different opinion about it. So which one is the right one? So tonight we dive into a key major texts by a gentleman named Shantarakshita. Protector of the Peace, is that what his name means? Something like that. And he's famous for having assisted in bringing the Dharma from India to Tibet in the second half of the 8th century. And teaching Dharma to the king and a bunch of other, what are they called? Entitled Tibetans. You know, they always start with the entitled ones first, right? And so he ordained 7 monks to see if they could do it, see if Tibetans had it within them. And he trained 7 smart young Tibetans as translators. And he tried to build the Samye monastery, and famously that effort was dismantled at night, and during the day they would try again, and same thing, which presumably was an allegorical tale for the resistance that the holders of the indigenous tradition of Bun presented against the importation and sort of forced adoption of Buddhism by the king, which you would expect, you know, if the kings suddenly bring, you know, this is my new religion, I want everybody to follow me in this religion. Sure, of course, people are going to object to that. They already have their own. And so he dialed in Padmasambhava. He asked Shantarakshita, who do we bring? And he suggested Padmasambhava, the great magician. He came in and took care of things, conquered all the obstructing spirits. He did retreats in the 13 Toksongs, the 13 tiger nest caves that surround the area of Tibet and Bhutan, one of which is Paro Toksong that Trungpa Rinpoche famously did a retreat in 1968. And then he came to Tibet and lived and taught for some unknown, unagreed upon number of years. And Shantarakshita went back to India, but he left his nephew Kamalashila there to teach the Tibetans, who is famously the author of the 3-fold or 3-part Bhavanakrama stages of meditation. That's the key text on meditation in the Tibetan tradition. And Shantarakshita, his main achievement is that he presents a Madhyamaka, or a tradition of the view, let's say, that combines, as Mipam Rinpoche says, Chittamatra and Madhyamaka, brings them together, and skillfully sort of uses them as complementary activities. He doesn't quite say explicitly at the beginning, but he also brings together Spotantrika and Prasangika Madhyamaka. And so briefly, he uses the view of mind only for relative truth, using the Chittamatra view, and then he, in the ultimate truth, he uses the scheme of the approximate and the actual ultimate truth of the Swatantrika tradition, and then uses some Swatantrika logic, and and then all the way up, sort of framing that, presents the Prasangika absence of conceptual fabrication as the overarching sort of container and ultimate view. Somehow bringing those three together, if that made any sense. And so what we see here is we're sort of cheating. We're like, we have this text by Shantarakshita, the root text, that we'll come back to. I thought it'd be neat to go through Mipam's introduction first. But Mipam, of course, lives in like the 19th century, so like 1200 years later. And so we get his introduction to Shantarakshita, which, of course, is sort of influenced by the intervening developments of that 1200 years. And he comes at this text from that point of view of sort of synthesized and a synthesis of these traditions, and also some references to other traditions and other holders or major authors in the Tibetan tradition and how they view these subjects. And so you see that woven in, not so much in this section of the introduction, but further on in the commentary to Shantarakshita's text. Shantarakshita's text is famous for focusing on what he says is the most powerful and easiest to access of the 5 Madhyamaka arguments for proving emptiness, proving that all phenomena are empty of themselves or anything that makes them themselves. And yes, a very fine approach to explaining how one goes wrong and goes right in that regard. But anyone familiar with any of those arguments for emptiness? The 5 skills of the Madhyamaka tradition? Like, what is the logic for saying that all phenomena are empty?
Like the chariot?
What about the chariot?
Well, there's no one part of it that makes it a chariot. It's just a collection of pieces. And if you rearrange them, you'd have a bookshelf or a bed frame.
I love that. You have a chariot car, a chariot bed frame, or chariot bookcase. That's cool. Yeah, so Chris, which of the logics is he referring to there?
I think that that would likely be the neither one nor many argument.
That's what I think. Yeah, what is
Yeah.
that argument?
So that argument goes that you're looking for whether something is truly one thing or if it's merely a collection of parts. And this is the argument that Shantarakshita will rely on almost entirely in this piece, showing that the various things that might be taken to be real things are neither one nor are they multiples. And he takes those to be exhaustive. If it's not one and it's not many, then it's not doesn't make any sense, incomprehensible.
Thank you. What's another one of the logics?
Another one of the logics would be like the diamond splinters, Vajra splinters, the investigation of the cause. And we saw a lot of this when we were
Like
doing
who done it?
Who Done It, a big mystery. Can't figure it out. We can't figure it out. You try to understand the
Because why?
cause,
What's that
that
logic?
that things either arise from themselves or they arise from something other, and that by drilling down into either of those again leads to absurd consequences.
Because
Because if a thing caused itself, then it would never change and be causing itself all over the place, right? And if a thing was caused by something else, then how could it be caused by that if it's another thing?
There's
Maybe you
another
can say
angle
this more
on that
clearly.
one.
Yeah,
No,
please.
that's great. That he goes through the four. Chandrakirti famously goes through the four options of production of other, self, other, both, or neither. But there's a certain sort of main aspect of the causation that makes causation a sort of risky business, which is that
The
cause and effect never meet.
the timeline, yeah. If it's already um, it, uh, if a cause happens after effect, how did that happen in two distinct moments? It's like, as if it appeared out of nowhere. And if they do, um, if cause and effect happen at the same time, then you have both things at the same time, and that doesn't make sense either. And if and if effect is first, then again, and not touching cause, then again you have nothing that can change the cause, that can affect the cause if it's not being affected by the effect, sort of. But it's a timeline issue.
Yeah, it's a timing issue. Why ask me why are Polish comedians so funny?
Why are Polish comedians so funny?
Timing. Let's see. So we're on page. Darn.
And then we have interdependence too, is one of those, right?
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Tell us about so there's of the five. There's three
I
main
I
ones.
jumped to the last one in a sense, right?
Yeah. So tell us about that one while I pull up the source book here.
So what I
What
don't
is
know
that
exactly,
logic?
I don't know if I can explain it. That there just isn't really anything because it's all just it dependent on uh, causes and well, I guess that's the funny thing actually is I guess interdependence is tricky because it does seem to be a little bit about causes, um, but basically the whole principle of everything being connected in that way and not separate or independent, so no things.
Good. Thank you. Okay. So I thought it'd be helpful to go through part of his introduction to this text, which is on page 227 of the source book, and then we'll go back to the first few stanzas of the text itself. Why? What's the purpose of the text? How does it give certainty? Three questions and the meaning of the whole range of Mahayana. So how does it sort of prove the superiority of Mahayana? And what do they mean when they say the approach of this text is easy, which is this idea that it uses the reasoning of one or many, which is said to be the easiest and most accessible of the five reasonings. That things
Everyone
are
found this to
one.
be an easy text, right?
Yeah, it's a piece of cake, right? But it is the easiest argument. You say to people, things don't really exist the way we think they are, and they say, what? You say, well, you just break them down, and they constantly, infinitely get broken down until strings or who knows what. And then thirdly, it's how does one gain Buddhahood through this approach? That's handy. So, how does it give certainty to the meaning of the whole range of the Mahayana? And just to give you a key on the numbering system, if you found that confusing. So the numbering system is, and maybe I'll share screen just briefly. So we have number 1, the need or purpose. The 2, how does it give certainty? And then we have 3, causally efficient thing. And then we have 3. And then we have another 3. And then we have another 3. And then we have, maybe I didn't give the end of the section. This end of the section goes back to 2's, just to make it really fun. So
Felt like the editor called out sick that day that they were doing the numbering.
they use this very archaic Tibetan style of outlining, which is that everything that's on the top level of the organizational chart of the outline is a 1, and then everything that reports to the 1 is a 2, and everything that reports to a 2 is a 3, if that makes any sense. So it's like an org chart. So there's, I think there's only one, there is an outline in the book, but we didn't share it, which is not relevant, so we'll skip that. Just to go briefly through this material, broadly speaking, the term Yanasam in page, source book page, what was it? 227. Point 2, that which conveys us to the 3 kinds of enlightenment, which are Shravaka, Pratyeka, and Bodhisattva, and Chittamata Yamaka are greater, with 7 features, and you can read about those in the footnotes. And in Chantarakshita's tradition, these views are brought together, are synthesized. In order to gain certainty on this, or in this, it is important to consider these following points. And then it gives a wonderful description of like, how do we approach the path? The wisdom that results from meditation experience is what brings us to the ultimate goal. So meditation, we're familiar with. Experience presumably relates to the triad of understanding, experience, and realization. That's so common in the Tibetan tradition for describing the progress of wisdom, the growth of wisdom. And if one does not get used to this unified view and fails to gain experience in it, the wisdom won't dawn. So the unified view of meditation and experience as aspects of the development of wisdom. So those activities are the support of wisdom. If we don't use this unified view, one fails to gain the wisdom, the unified view of meditation experience. And the wisdom of meditation is in turn a result of the wisdom derived from reflecting, which is the second of the 3 prajnas. So the prerequisite for that is study, listen to, and study the teachings, in particular of this excellent text. However, the merely receiving these teachings and being interested in them is not a cause. One must gain certainty in the unmistaken view, meditation and practice, and abandon false dualistic thought. If one engages in this path, which establishes through valid reasoning the meaning of the Buddha's words, pure in terms of the 3 knowledge sources. And just briefly, so the footnote on this, 115, the 3 knowledge sources are perception for manifest phenomena, so phenomena that are the objects of our senses, for inference, for hidden phenomena that are not perceptible by our senses, which can be phenomena that are blocked by other objects, or phenomena that are just intrinsically or by nature rather not perceptible by perception, and scriptural authority for extremely hidden things, such as the workings of karma. Is the general example of an extremely hidden thing. If the complexities of karma are only accessible by a Buddha, completely enlightened Buddha, and related by that Buddha in his teachings. Going back to the text, one will gain extraordinary conviction and mistaken view, meditation, and practice. I think, did I give the footnotes in the source book? At the end? Yeah, I forgot to do that. Okay, so you guys don't have the footnotes. So, on source book 228, we dive into in the middle there. It's therefore important to realize it's possible to train on the unmistaken path only after one has gained understanding and certainty in it. If certainty is not gained by one's own efforts, it should be understood that even if one meditates, one is not on the unmistaken path leading to the goal. Sort of interesting statement, that way of combining meditation and understanding, that there needs to be that combination. Otherwise, one can meditate for a long time without it really producing the results one is interested in.
I thought this was so fantastic to, I think, the common misconception that, like, well, why bother studying? I could just meditate all day, and
Yeah,
that would be sufficient.
Yeah, it'll just happen.
What's the point of thinking about all this stuff so hard? Just sit down on the cushion.
It's a waste of time. Madhyamaka Alamkara, Shantarakshita's text, the ornament of the Madhyamaka, the middle way, in which both kinds of valid reasoning are found, the valid reasoning of conventional truth and the valid reasoning of ultimate truth, contains the essence of all reasoning. Through upholding just this text alone and understanding the profound, vast teachings of the Buddha, the entire range of the Mahayana will be effortlessly achieved. So Mipam is a huge fan of this text. And, there's a little bit of a skipping to the end point of this series of courses, which is his text on the Genton. But his view is he takes the Nyingma view, and the Nyingma view basically looks at Shantarakshita's text as its source and sees the view in the Nyingma tradition as being this basically continuous stream that does not veer and change from Shantarakshita through a gentleman named Rongzong, that we'll see in the next course, through a gentleman named Longchenpa, which hopefully people have heard about, and then through other great teachers. Dujur Rinpoche has a great presentation of that view of the middle way, and then Mipam himself. So he just praises this text up and down, and one part of it is clearly this idea of synthesizing and accepting both Nagarjuna and Asanga as being completely on the mark and not in contradiction, but it just sort of in coordination. It's like the Buddha set the teachings in motion, and first Nagarjuna comes along to undercut belief in existence, and then Asanga comes along to present how to not fall into either the belief in non-existence or to, well, really to not fall into a belief in non-existence by having negated existence, to sort of ultimately, to adamantly, let's say. Let's see, on the next page, 229, as it is said, the synthesis of the two approaches established by reasoning is found only in the Madhyamaka Alankara. And it seems like he's talking about Chittamatra and Madhyamaka here, and later on he'll bring in Swatantra. It stands to reason that this text is deserving of high praise, and that will become clear if one ponders well the immaculate view of the Mahayana Sutras, and he names all these not exclusively third turning sutras, but a number of them are third turning sutras. The Samadhi Raja is the second turning sutra. The Akshayamati is a very famous sutra of the second turning that gives a version of the turnings in it, of the first and second turning, or the idea of interpretable and definitive teachings, and basically says definitive teachings are those that present emptiness. And so all those schools in Tibet that cleave to the second turning focus on the Akshayamati Nirdesha Sutra, which sort of disses the third turning, or doesn't really recognize it. And they list the Prajnaparamita Sutra, obviously the main sutra of the second turning. In particular, the present text can be used to give sure knowledge of the five propositions specifically associated with Shantarakshita's traditions, which are eminently superior to other understandings of Madhyamaka. Doesn't hold back. 1. The text posits causally efficient things as only authentic objects of valid cognition. So instead of taking the Prasangika Madhyamaka view of conventional reality as being basically just incorrect understanding, incorrect experience, he actually says it's more helpful to understand that there's imaginary things such as the horns of a rabbit, and there's causally efficient things that are the objects of valid cognition on a relative level. And so those are causally efficient things, and it's like some way of connecting with the rest of the world, even though understanding that those are all projections of mind. It has a way of asserting relative awareness, self-knowing, and self-illuminating, which is another topic of great contention within the Madhyamaka tradition that we haven't really touched on yet, but this idea that there's, well, we've touched on self-awareness, reflexive awareness, that quality of knowing that you're knowing. In addition to knowing your object, you're knowing that you're knowing your object. And thirdly, given that the different phenomena of the external world appear by the power of the mind, it posits them as mind only. So all of conventional reality is viewed as mind only, but not ultimately. And it makes a distinction between the proximate ultimate truth and the ultimate in itself, which is an aspect of the Swatantrika system that provides logical reasonings for understanding emptiness, which, such as the five that we just talked about, are basically Swatantrika schemes, Swatantrika Madhyamaka. Whereas Prasangika Madhyamaka does not use any logical syllogisms, it just uses absurd conclusions, right, as its modus operandi. So causally efficient thing is the only authentic object of valid cognition, in the sense that it's able to perform a function. Non-things are unable to appear through their own power on the basis of real things, they are imputed and constructed by the mind through the process of elimination of all that is other than they are. So this is the traditional way of describing non-things, includes or is primarily or exclusively conceptual ideas, conceptual objects of cognition, which are achieved by a process of eliminating everything that doesn't fit what I'm trying to talk about or think about. Whereas perception, meaning sense perception, direct, non-conceptual perception of phenomena that are able to perform a function, is inclusive. It includes all the attributes of the phenomena that one experiences. And whereas conceptual mind operates in the opposite way. It excludes everything. That's not what we're trying to think about. And so conceptual mind is sort of a process coming up with its idea. And non-conceptual direct perception is instantaneous. It's just taking in inclusively the aspects or characteristics presented to the sense, whatever sense or senses. This understanding agrees with ordinary perception, establishes all objects of knowledge appearing as objects of ordinary consciousness, that all objects of knowledge are impermanent. Consequently, space and other compounded things are only imagined to be permanent. So all objects of knowledge are impermanent. In fact, non-things such as space and cessation have no positive causally efficient reality at all. They're just imputations. So he's dispensing with non-compounded phenomena as being imputations. They're not real things. They don't have causal efficacy. They don't cause enlightenment. The cognition of the cessation without thought doesn't cause enlightenment.
So the Sarvastivada also had this sort of approach of, in order for a thing to be a dharma, it had to be causally effective. And then they had a funny workaround, because for them, the unconditioned dharmas, such as cessation and nirvana, are also dharmas. So they have this scheme where space is seen to be a cause of non-hindrance, and nirvana is seen to be a cause of a sort of a goal, an objective condition of meditation. So what's being said here is that those arguments are no good.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So,
Yeah,
so would that
everything exists.
so would that be saying space is a concept of the mind, therefore space is impermanent? Is that what it's saying?
Space is just non-existent. It's not a thing. It's not a
Non-existent.
real thing.
Okay. Because it's in here.
A lot of space in there. Whatever is a thing must possess causal efficacy. It must be able to perform a function, which gives rise to the whole Puritan ethic, I think, right? You know, in order to be a worthy human being, you have to do something. And if it functions, its existence is momentary. Thus, it's easily established that all efficient things are impermanent. If one understands how one engages in substantial and imputed phenomena, so he just gave these two types of phenomena as technical terms. Substantial phenomena are those that have causal efficacy and they perform a function. And imputed phenomena are the opposite in terms of appearance and in terms of elimination. So again, perceiving substantial phenomena in terms of how they appear, and imputed phenomena are perceived or not perceived, are cognized by a process of elimination. And thereby one will gain a deep understanding of the first point, which is that the causally efficient thing is the only authentic object of valid cognition, which he says is like the heart and eyes of the text on Brahmanas, the key aspect of the teachings on valid cognition. So the theory that divides conventional into unmistaken and mistaken and takes the causally efficient as the ultimate truth accords with the Sautrantika. So Sautrantika, very similar to the Sarvastivada in this case, of viewing causally effective phenomena as being real, causally efficient phenomena as being ultimate truth. They don't actually use the term ultimate truth, it's genuinely real, but it's the same input. And we take that.
In other words, the dharmas are what is ultimately real. And the conglomerates, the conceptualization of dharmas into wholes is what is relatively true.
Such as donut holes.
Such as donuts.
In the Madhyamaka Alamkara, although it is considered that outer objects are not concealed, they're perceptible. They perform the function of being perceivable, but arise through the power of mind. The conventional assessment of their appearing mode must be performed in the way we have just mentioned. In other words, only the causally efficient thing is the proper object of assessment. So he's using that scheme even within the context of mind only on the relative level, which I believe he clarifies further as we go. Self-knowing mind or reflexive awareness, just that essential point that it's his first sentence, the self-knowing mind exists only on the conventional level. The Chittamatra view is that on the ultimate level, the self-reflecting or the self-knowing mind is the ultimate reality, right? Mind only. And so mind only says that the relative is a fiction of the mind, a projection of the mind, and that the mind is the truly perfected nature, that self-cognizing mind. And here he's siding with the Madhyamakas and saying, no, that's it only exists on the conventional level, that self-knowing mind. Although the nature of conscious mind, well, this is a fine point. So this is not that relevant. Let's skip to the next point. Mind only, if one accepts a phenomenon, the projection or manifestation of the mind, a true understanding of the actual mode of being of the conventional is achieved, together with a confident grasp of how beings enter the samsaric process or turn away from it. This lens of understanding that what we experience is the projection of mind gives us a way of understanding how the mind gets caught, sort of wraps itself up into nirvana and can unwrap itself out of samsara. I think I said nirvana, samsara in both cases. According to the ultimate mode of being, which is beyond all conceptual extremes, reference, and characteristics, it is true that phenomena are not found to be the mind, because phenomena are beyond all conceptual extremes, reference, and characteristics. For this ultimate mode of being transcends the conventional. If, however, one confines oneself to the appearing mode of the conventional, the existence of extramental, meaning outside of the mind, phenomena is invalidated by reasoning, and these same phenomena are likely shown to be the mind only. As this assertion of phenomena does not contradict empirical experience, there is no better account of the convention. If one examines phenomena which are the deposit of mental habituation, the excretion, excrement, they are found not to exist. However, they appear incontrovertibly within the form of our experience. This cannot be denied. Reasoning based on phenomenal evidence proves that they are merely mental appearances. They are, in other words, the mind's projections, which is to say, the mind's self-experience. Beyond this is the ultimate level, which transcends the conventional. one should understand it's impossible to posit the conventional anyway superior to this. So he's convinced this is the proper way to understand the conventional. This is also the essence of Dharmakirti's elucidation of the true status of convention, all as perceived by the Buddha. The combination of conventional valid cognition and ultimate reason is the particular message of this text. So in the earlier tradition of Dharmakirti and Dignaga, they sort of go between relative and ultimate levels of truth without really clearly delineating that there's a type of valid cognition that applies to the relative and one that applies to the ultimate. And so one of the key features of this text and this tradition is this clarification that there's pramana, valid cognition that applies on the relative level, and there's valid cognition that applies to the ultimate level. And you have to understand that these are separate schemes in order to understand the nuances and import of the system. On the bottom of that page, to establish all things as being the mind is the supreme and distinctive feature of the tenets of all the Buddhas. It is indeed the true understanding of the pure and motive phenomena. It is the supreme crucial point of the pith instructions for meditators. It destroys the whole mechanism of existence with a sure touch of a butcher who knows exactly how to kill an animal. What an image. Wow. Like a carpenter who understands how to work his wood, and if this point is associated with extraordinary methods, it becomes the very essence of the pith instructions of the Vajrayana, which is the path or yana that employs extraordinary methods. And there's no other way really to understand Vajrayana than to understand that Vajrayana is based upon the idea or the understanding of the mental projection quality of the relative. Then he goes on to a little bit in the next paragraph on the path. Let's see the second sense. Some think that it is by logical arguments and extensive explanations that they will accomplish the path. But while is it indeed necessary to have a general understanding of the teachings to hear and reflecting, it is necessary to bring them all into one essential point through the practice. So though earlier he said you need to have some understanding, conviction, and the view to practice effectively, here he says you don't just rely on the view, you have to bring that into practice. And at the bottom of that long paragraph, he says, during the night, one's caught up in one's dreams. One tries to deal with them using other methods, meaning other than realizing that they're dreams, there's no end. But if one understands they all arise from the mind, it's pacified in a single stroke. We should understand the appearances of existence, which are endless in time and unlimited in extent, are similar to the visions of our dreams. So the last point in what we included in this reading is the distinction between the approximate ultimate truth and the actual. This is this idea that we can approximate the ultimate by using reasoning, by using logical reasoning. We can come to a clear understanding of the ultimate, and that by doing so, it helps us to make the leap into the actual ultimate truth. So this tradition has this odd way of dividing ultimate truth, which in reality, so to speak, has no divisions, has no levels, has no aspects in any way. But they say, well, there's a facsimile, which is really part of relative truth, but it's like they call it part of the ultimate truth. It's the approximate. This excellent tradition is indeed supreme if it is not pointed out right at the beginning of the phenomena with no true existence. There's no means of dispelling our mistaken clinging to reality, for we've grown accustomed to it from unoriginated time. Nevertheless, if this alone is taught as the ultimate truth, certain persons of weak understanding might think that non-existence, that is the negation of the object of refutation, namely existence, is the ultimate reality. Clinging to such emptiness, such people become incurable, unbearable. This manner of clinging can be of two kinds. One can cling to emptiness as a positive value or a thing, such as that which by virtue of cognizing it produces liberation, as is often the case. We see construed in Buddhist texts that by seeing emptiness we achieve liberation. So the emptiness becomes a positive entity that has a causally effective quality to it. It produces a function.
And this
Performs a
this is
function.
sort of similar to the Abhidharma view of nirvana as an unconditioned dharma that can be perceived in meditation.
Yeah, thank you. Or one can cling to it as a non-thing, mere absence. And by virtue of that, we sort of dispense with the positive qualities of enlightenment. One may say here that it isn't proper to cling to any conceptual extreme, but of definite knowledge which is elicited by rational investigation and is the nectar spring. That's an odd term. The nectar spring of profound emptiness. The cure indeed for all ills of existence is spurned in the belief that there should be no mental activity of any kind. One falls into a thick and murky gravy devoid of thought. This renders it very difficult to perceive the profound reality, to taste it, to realize it, to bring it into experience. Right, so this fine line between refuting existence and non-existence. Skipping the quote, consequently, it's through the approximate ultimate that clinging to reality is at first step destroyed. So there's a path quality to the alignment, the combination of Swatantrika, which uses the approximate ultimate, Prasangaka's use of the actual. Well, they both rely on the actual, don't rely, but you know what I mean. Later, by means of the teaching on the actual ultimate, clinging to non-reality is also halted. In short, there is no need to add true existence and so on to the four extremes. And that's a jibe at the Galupas, who are constantly like, say, well, and also Bhava Viveka, who's like, you gotta add true existence. We're negating true existence. And this is a very important point in the writings of Nepal. All such conceptual targets collapse in the great freedom from conceptual constructs. The profound reality to be realized by self-cognizing awareness is easily recognized. This demonstrates the need for the approximate ultimate. He says that what people often do mistakenly is they say that things are empty of true existence, and then you have but you leave the phenomena as being there. So the vase, the table is empty of true existence, but there's still a table there. And then you have empty tables and so forth. And so you haven't actually dispensed with the clinging to the table and so forth. And then he says, you might think, oh, well, purporting the view of the unspeakable Huashang, which would be the most heinous of all errors. This is not the paragraph after the quotes on the next page. It's not at all the same as the position of Hashang and others. It's neat how like almost every text spells this guy's name differently. Hashang, and others, wherein perception of phenomena is blocked so that no characteristics are seen and there's no mental activity whatsoever. On the contrary, the mere arresting of mental movement, far from being the dispelling of all conceptual extremes, is not even a cause of the dispelling of the ontological extreme of existence. Freedom from discursive thoughts is not like that at all. And finally, and then we'll go over to the verses. That bottom paragraph on that page, let's see. Therefore, following what has been described, freedom from conceptual constructs should be understood as the state that's not adulterated with the five conditions, which are in the footnotes. The five conditions, just briefly, are sort of interesting. It's presented in his Mipam's commentary on the 9th chapter of the Bodhicharvatara, called the Norbu Ketaka, the Ketaka jewel, and it's like one of the crown jewels of his philosophical thought. And hopefully we'll study that someday now that it's nicely translated. He says freedom from discursive thought can only be described apophatically. What does apophatically mean, Chris? Apoph.
Let
Does it
me
mean like being on a diet?
It's a theological term, and it is it's an allusion to something by denying it. So
Freedom from discursive thought can only be described apophatically. Interesting.
so it would be like, well, we can't actually talk about the enlightened state. It's to talk about it would bring it into the realm of dualism, and it
the
is
characteristics of the enlightened state.
yeah, it's non-dual. So we can only we can't talk about it. So that would be an apophatic move.
That which cannot be named.
Yeah. First
By
rule of
denying
fight.
all its positive qualifications. The first is the state that's wholly free from mental process of identification of objects with names. Experience, for experience by a very young baby. Pure transcendence refers to the state without analytical thought, gross or subtle, characteristic of the form realm samadhis. So these are five subtle levels of cognitive experience that are often thought to be similar to or of the same nature as the stilling of the mind in the ultimate.
Is this from the footnotes that you're going to be sharing with us later?
Yeah, going to be is the key part of that. Thank you. Please remind me if I neglect my going to. Following what has been described, freedom from conceptual constructs, coming back to the text, should be understood as a state that is not adulterated with these five conditions, such as an absence of mental activities. These occur in experience of worldly beings. Once one has used reasoning to examine phenomena, found them to be non-existent, if one meditates while still holding on to this non-existence, then, although this acts as an antidote to clinging to existence, it does not get rid of the idea that things are unreal or empty. How therefore can this qualify as the freedom from conceptual constructs and genuine primordial wisdom realizing emptiness? On the other hand, some people say that to affirm a non-applicative negation which negates true existence is the view of nihilism. But the nihilistic view is to deny the principle of causality while assuming the true existence of things. So he's presenting this union of Sautrantika and Prasangika as being the true middle way in terms of like including both of them skillfully where they are skillful and not where they're not. So that's a general little snippet or glimpse of the system of Shantarashita. Why don't we dive into his texts? This will lead us through the first, we were given the first 23 verses to look at. Back on page 50, what was it, 120, 221 of the source book.
Thank you.
223.
And you all have just received the footnotes in your inbox. So now Derek doesn't have to remember. Okay, so I just want to give an advanced warning that I have not my usual childcare support for the night. So anticipate interruptions. So here we have the source text. And as we have discussed, this is a synthesis of Madhyamaka and Yogacara. And in particular, he's going to be using the Madhyamaka device of neither singular nor plural. And he cuts straight to the chase. So in the first shloka or stanza, and we're on page 223 in the source book, the entities that our and other schools affirm, since they exist inherently in neither singular nor plural, in ultimate reality are without intrinsic being. They are like reflections. So this is going to be his main argument. And what's very interesting is that he opens this by stating that our school does affirm entities. So already we have a nuanced take that he is saying that while we are affirming entities, they are without intrinsic being like reflections. And this argument of neither singular nor plural is going to be used sort of over and over again, which, as Mipam and Derek noted, makes this an easy text, fortunately for us. So then in the second stanza, we have an argument against self-causation. So causation, as we've discussed already, is either from self or from other. So this is the argument against self-causation. Producing their effects sequentially, eternal entities cannot be one, if each of their effects is different from the others. These entities can have no permanence. So this is a critique of a non-Buddhist school that we've seen before, Samkhya. And Samkhya has this scheme, which very briefly has a sort of undifferentiated monistic pure consciousness called Purusha, out of which the manifest world of phenomena emerges, which is called Prakriti. And it's whether or not this is something we saw when we looked at Chandrakirti previously. Whether or not these are necessarily like the most robust presentations of non-Buddhist schools is sort of a side issue. But presenting this sort of argument, it can be applied to all manner of arguments that might occur within Buddhists themselves. Such as if you have an idea of some sort of like numinous substrate, like the Dharmakaya or emptiness or Dharma Dhatu that the world sort of like percolates up from, and that is the real thing. This is an argument that can be used to correct that notion. That if an eternal entity, so we're going back to the source here, producing their effects sequentially, eternal entities cannot be one. So if this eternal substrate has effects that occur over time, that means that it can't be one thing. Because there are a diversity of effects, there must be some sort of diversity of causes. So it can't be one single cause. If each of their effects is different from the others, these entities can have no permanence. So if the identities of the effects take place over time and have variation over time, then so must the causes. There can't be a single thing without parts that produces the diversity of results that we see in the phenomenal world. Rob. Sorry, Rob, you're muted, and then I muted myself when I told you to unmute.
Okay, sorry. So it's my understanding, like we just went over how enlightenment is itself beyond concept and beyond description. Doesn't it follow that any kind of substrate like Dharmakaya is also beyond concept? And then, therefore, how can you apply a logical system to it, saying, you know, if you're going to have effects coming out of it, it can't be one effect, it can't be multiple effects. That's my question, and I genuinely am curious.
Yeah, I think I think that's just sort of they're saying that it's an absurd consequence to think that anything, even if things sort of beyond conception, could behave in this way, and that it results to it becomes a certain form of magical thinking. You know, there's this mysterious thing, and then a rabbit gets pulled out of a hat, and then, the world as we see it appears as we see it. So I guess there is some sort of commitment implied here that the world must follow some sort of logic. Cool. Um,
Yeah, but we've been deconstructing reality, these last 6 months, and and Madhyamaka itself is proving to us that there's no logic, to you know, it, how things work. Um, it seems like there's a kind of like, there's no logic on when we look at a problem from one side, but now there is logic when we look at it from this other side.
Yeah, okay. Actually, thanks for that, because I think that you're sort of anticipating the
The
next
next
move
move
that
that
Sharon
Sharon
that
that
Oh, sorry.
sorry,
sorry,
you yeah. So you're anticipating the move that Shantarakshita actually does make. Um, so for these Samkhya's and for other people who might assume a real essence that causes real results, um, assuming that real entities are confined by rules such as non-contradiction, um, they have to behave logically. However, if you are assuming that a substrate is unreal, is not an entity, is not a thing, uh, then that sort of frees up the system a little bit. So Samkhya wants ultimate reality to be a real thing. If ultimate reality isn't a real thing, then the relationship between it and the things that appear is less important. So we can have what we have in Chantarakshita is sort of an internally coherent relative truth that is somehow the display of a non-existent ultimate truth, and that system seems to work. But the essential difference is that there isn't an essence that is being attributed to the ultimate truth. Cool. Bueno. Bueno. Cool. Cool. Derek, did you have something to add?
I was just confused by Roberts bringing in the notion of Dharmakaya, which I don't think we're talking about here, are we?
I brought that
And
in as something that could be seen as some sort of substrate,
I
uh,
see. Okay.
ultimate essence that the form kayas ripple up from in an
Ah,
essential
okay.
way. Yeah.
So that's the where the idea of it and it being productive, having an effect came in. I see. Gotcha.
Like the idea of the alia as the ground, that type of thing.
that type of thing. But if the alia if doesn't have an essence, if the alia isn't a real thing, then it's maybe not such a problematic thing.
And it doesn't give rise to anything.
Yeah,
It
if
doesn't
it's
produce
not a
anything.
thing, that doesn't give rise to real things.
So then their real problem was the fact that they somehow wanted those their
They
ultimate.
wanted it both ways.
Yeah, they wanted it to be real, and they couldn't give that up. It seems like at a certain point you could, imagine the community say, okay, fine, then it's not real, like, but they wouldn't, you know what I mean? It's like, I guess you kind of have to look into what
They
does
just
that,
had to change their, yeah, they just had to change their definition slightly.
right? That's where it gets kind of interesting is like, what is it that, you sort of have to get back into this question of what does it mean to say what is real and why does that matter so much?
All right. So at this point, we have dispensed as a logical the idea that a thing could be caused by itself. And so we now move on to the third stanza or sloka. Um, and also in the schools that say the uncompounded is cognized by wisdom that results from meditation. This self-same object is not one, for it is linked with knowing instants that arise in sequence. Okay, so who are the schools that say the uncompounded is cognized by a wisdom that results from meditation? We were talking about them earlier.
The Montessori,
The Montessori, the Maha, sorry. This is an
Sarvas.
Abhi, yeah, Abhidharma view.
Is this Sautantrikas?
Yeah, this is
This is like the sort of the uncompounded is the dharmas here? Are we
yeah.
talking? Okay.
Yeah, so there are these the uncompounded dharmas, right, like nirvana and like space that can be observed directly in meditation. And
The two
you know,
types of cessation, natural and brought
right.
about by cultivating the path.
Yeah, and that so that these are directly cognizable and are things that uh, nirvana or emptiness is a thing that can be perceived. Okay. Um, so the issue with this is that first you're sitting on your meditation cushion, not seeing it, and then by some miracle you see it, and then you get off your meditation cushion and you don't see it anymore. And sort of like, where did it come from? Where did it go? Where did it come from, Cotton Eye Joe? Um, the idea is that the ultimate thing should be atemporal, right? It shouldn't have temporal parts because if it has parts that exist over time, it's not a permanent real thing. Um, however, if it's atemporal, we should be able to see it all the time everywhere, but we don't. Um, or if it is temporal, then it's not eternal. Um, so you could say, and you might be tempted to say, well, it is permanent. We just our perception of it is temporal. We're the ones who exist in time. And you take the blinds off and then you see the clouds part and you see the sun, and then the clouds come back and the sun's gone. And that would seem to work um, if if sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. That would seem to work, but only if only if the absolute is removed from the concept of time and thus unreal. But for the Abhidharmikas, everything is dharmas are real and are conditioned by time. That they come into and out of existence every instant. And that is how that we can perceive them, and our the whole perceptual system is sort of locked into that temporal thing. So if it is a thing that is subject to perception, it has to have temporal parts. If you want to remove it from that process, again, like we were talking about earlier, if you want to with the Samkhya thing, if you want to remove it from the relative truth, you can, and that works, but then we're no longer talking about Abhidharma. So this argument then gets spelled out over the next few lines. Um, if already known to an earlier consciousness, it continues to be present to a later consciousness. So we're talking about, right, the uncompounded. If the uncompounded is already known to earlier consciousness, it continues to be present to later consciousness. The earlier consciousness becomes the later, and the later too becomes the earlier. If a moment of consciousness is perceiving an object at one time and perceiving the same object at a different time, those two moments are sort of indistinguishable. And so the whole concept of the linearity of time will collapse here. Um, and moving on to the next stanza, if the uncompounded is not present in conscious moments earlier and later, this very uncompounded, you should know, is momentary, like consciousness itself. Should it arise by force of moments that occur in sequence one by one, it is not uncompounded. It is like the mind and the mental factors. So far, so good? So what is interesting here, right, and we saw this again earlier with Nagarjuna, is that the idea that is sort of being attacked here is the notion that an instance of a dharma at one moment causing an instance of a dharma at the next moment means that that dharma is caused by something, and therefore it lacks swabhava, therefore is not eternal, therefore is not a thing with self-existence. This is not a notion that the Abhidharmikas would necessarily endorse. They believe that things with swabhava can be caused in certain ways. Um, so he seems to address this somewhat in the next stanza. If you consider that all these moments, the uncompounded, wholly on its own occurs, it must forever be or not be, and there is no dependence upon something else. So if a thing it exists wholly on its own without being caused by anything, it either has to be there always or there never. It can't be brought in or out of existence by something else. In other words, it can't participate in causality. It can't cause something else. It can't be caused by something else. So we have this sort of colorful next stanza. What purpose does it serve to pin your fond beliefs on what is destitute of causal potency? What used for lustful girls to estimate the charms or defects of a neutered male? That was just delightful. So the idea is, if it's an atemporal thing, it can't have any causal efficacy. And if it doesn't have any causal efficacy, in what way could it be real? Um, yeah, as we've been discussing, only real things for both the Abhidharmikas um, and for this system. Uh, can relative truth in this system can only be conceived of as having real existence if they have some sort of causal efficacy, a thing that they do. If they don't have a thing that they do, they ain't a thing, you know? Uh, how else would you ascribe their thingness to them? They would proliferate all over the place and everywhere. Um, so we are now moving. That these last few stanzas have been addressing the Abhidharmikas. And next we're going to address Pugalavada. Pugalavada, our favorite school that believed in the existence of the self, the Buddhist school that believed in the existence of the self. And just as sort of like a side note, you have to recall that he's writing in around 800, like right around the turn of the ninth century. Is that right, Derek? Um, So it gives you an idea of how persistent the school of the Pugalavadas was, Derek.
So 770, 760, somewhere in that range.
Cool. Thank you for
But
that.
they would argue that they don't believe in the self, they believe in the person, which is the collection of the aggregates and the carrier of karma and so forth. But they would not use the word self.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah, they have a more sophisticated
And,
view
and
than
our response could be, yeah, right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But this is a school with sort of incredible endurance over time. And so,
That's a great point. They just
ought to
keep
be
coming
taken
up.
seriously. Yeah. And certainly a school with much more sort of a much more of a record than like Sautantrika, which we take very seriously. Um, so anyhow, that's a here nor there. Okay, so the person is not able to be pointed out as other than existing momentarily. It should be clearly noted that it has no true existence in the singular or plural. So again, if the person is something that endures over time, the idea is that the person is something that endures over time, as it has some sort of real thingness to it. But or at least some sort of unity. I am the same person today that I was yesterday, that I was a week ago, that I was 5, 10, 20 years ago. That there's one essence that all of those little slices of time point to. Um, if that is the case, um, how can that single essence appear at multiple different times? It's either momentary or it's permanent. But if it's permanent, how does it participate in the moment by moment world in which we live in? Cynthia.
I'm just wondering, so this thing is really very different from, let's say, what Subni Rinpoche likes to call the mere eye. You know, uh, that you're saying that they had some notion that it was actually fixed and permanent, even though that seems like to be a complete, not even consistent with observable reality.
Yeah, well, I mean, whether or not, and again, like we should like bracket this presentation from like questions of like, did the Pugalavadas, was this really their actual view historically?
Okay, yeah,
He's presenting this view. Maybe it's a straw man, maybe it isn't. We don't need to. That's sort of not what we need to concern ourselves with now.
okay, yeah.
Um,
Sorry, it's just that it struck me that in some ways, when people do talk about this, there's no I, but what are we all walking around being? And that's where, Sokni Rinpoche. I mean, other people may have other ways of doing it, but he has the difference between the reified I, which we clearly don't accept, and this notion of a mere I, kind of goes along with mere appearances. That it's like that's what we're operating with, and that's what's kind of walking around, being born, dying, and all that stuff is this mere I. So I'm just curious whether that. Anyway, but yeah, we'll leave aside the question of what did they really think.
yeah, and
The
I'm sure.
mere eye is
Yeah.
What?
the mere eye is a Galukpa artifice or skillful means, and it's not meant to have any real existence. So It doesn't have to be one or many. It doesn't have to be momentary or permanent. It's just a label that is refers to the feeling of there being some coordinator,
And,
some experiencer.
hmm, I don't know, is that the same as the one as what Sokni Rinpoche talks about? I don't know if he's drawing from the Gelugpa thing or whether this is his.
That's how the Gelugpas use it, as like they
Okay.
they try to say we're not refuting the existence of the skandhas, let's say. The fact that there's a sense of experience. Like people get confused when you refute ego and self, and they're like, well, so there's nothing here. What's going on? Who is, where does karma accrue? What's reborn? And so the idea is that there's a conceptual presumption that is that there is some carrier of the experience moment to moment. And that doesn't have an ultimate status to it. We're not, he's not putting it forth, that's why he's calling it mere I. It's just like mere appearance, as you said.
Right.
And to the Pudgalavada. So Pudgalavada persists to the current day. Tsoknyi Rinpoche is a Pudgalavada.
Well, that's what I was thinking is that in a way, I mean, you can understand why it persists because it helps to answer that question that people always have, that there must be something, right? Anyway, is Rob's hand raised for a reason?
The person, two self. There's the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. So when you say the selflessness of phenomena, we all accept that there's phenomena, right? But they're empty. And so likewise, you could say, well, there's a person, but the person is empty. And so that's the mere person. Sorry, Rob.
It's okay. I was thinking of it as it's sort of like a placeholder designation for continuity. You know, the of experience.
The continuum of the aggregate.
And of course, functional in relating with other people and society. I think Shantarakshita would, he put his name on the front of the book, right? So he must have like had some sort of notion of the conventional utility of the self.
That'd
Uh,
be, that'd be funny if everybody started saying their name was Mir Shantarakshita.
yeah,
We
sure.
should do
Yeah, that would be like like the cult where everyone has the same name, you know.
Well, I mean, in a sense, you just have to look. I mean, names and all that stuff. It's shorthand because if we didn't use those kind of things as a designator, you'd have to go into this enormous explanation to try to let somebody know who you're talking about.
Totally, and useful fictions are how the world goes round, right? Like, no one thinks like money is somehow written into like the structure of the universe, and like ontologically real entity, and yet none of us have any trouble. Well, maybe some of us have certain trouble paying our bills, but you know what I mean. So I'm just gonna sort of press on, and we'll see how far we get, and yeah, and just keep going until I run out of time. We're on stanza sloka number 10. How can a pervasive thing, is pervasive here meaning sort of occurring over time and space, how can a pervasive thing be one? For it is linked with things in different places. Things extended likewise are not one. For instance, they can be both hidden and revealed. So this is a line of argumentation that we've seen before, specifically as it relates to spatial extension. So the dharmas, you'll recall, are supposed to be dimensionless, points in space without any dimensionality. They don't have a front, they don't have a back, they don't have a top, they don't have a bottom. They're just sort of a point rather than a pixel for those of you who do computer graphics. Meaning you can zoom in on them infinitely and they never get any bigger. Okay. Um, so the question, and we've asked this many times, is that how could you possibly make something with dimensionality out of a bunch of little points that don't have any dimensionality? So if if you for instance, they can be both hidden and revealed. So how would things be hidden if they how would something hide something else if it didn't have any dimensionality? You would need it would need some sort of mass, some sort of surface in order to cast a shadow to block, vision.
The Klingon cloaking device.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not a Trekkie. Um, joining our surrounding or disposed without interstices. Interstices are like the spaces between things. The particle has a central place. The particle that has a central place is turned exclusively towards a single particle. If you insist that this is truly so, you Abhidharmika, though it must face the other particles, how is it that earth and water and other things can be extended? Or maybe they do not. So same sort of thing. How can a thing with a central place with a single dimensionless space exist in three-dimensional extended space? How could you do it? How do you pull the rabbit out of the hat? Don't make any sense. If you say that the sides that face the different particles are different, how comes how comes it that the finest particle is one, an entity devoid of parts? How can a if the left side of a dharma touches one thing and the right side of the dharma touches another thing, how can that dharma possibly be without extension? The particle, it's proved through all of these absurd examples, does not exist inherently. Therefore, it is clear, and this is the turn. Are you ready for the turn? Therefore, it is clear that the eyes or substances and the rest, the many things the many things proposed by our and other schools have no intrinsic being. So we're moving, this is the turn. We are now moving from we've dismantled particles and the idea of an external extended world, and now we are going to start taking apart the world, the inner world of perception that seemingly depends on the external world of particles. So we're on 15 and page 225 in the source book. The former means here objects, the particle, that which is known. Uh, the former are their nature, or they constituted them. The latter are the properties of the particles, themselves the agents of action. So the former, as I said, is the particle. The latter is the perceiver, that which knows. So former and latter being sort of a way of describing the way perception works, that first there's a thing and then you see it. Mary Beth.
I'm sorry, can we just go back to number 14 again? So they're saying then, I think, that our eyes and our eye faculty, all that sense eye business is not real.
That's my read. Derek.
Roger that.
Thanks, Roger. So we're now moving into okay. So the former the objects, the particles, the dharmas, The latter, the perceiver, the mind, the sense faculties. Um, So he's sort of saying that this is the natural response. That if the external world is seen to be unreal, then the internal world must be real. I mean, something's got to be real, right? I mean, how else do you explain all this? So the retreat into an internal world, um, which can be understood as a incorrect reified version of Yogacara, right? Mind only. It's all in your head, man. Um, again, with the same setup, universals and instantiated things are only their agglomeration. Same setup. The universals like tables and chairs and people and horses are conglomerations of infinitesimally small entities, just as in the Abhidharma. But now it's all mental. Now it's all mental events. Um, Consciousness arises as the contrary, right? As the counter argument to the unreal world of particles. Consciousness arises as the contrary, as the alternative of matter. Consciousness arises as the contrary of matter, gross and inanimate. By nature, mind is immaterial and it is self-aware. So what we see here is a provisional acceptance of mind, uh, defining it as immaterial and self-aware. Um, he's not necessarily saying it has an essence or not. That's sort of being put to the side. But he is acknowledging that the self-awareness of mind counts in a certain way, can't be dismissed. All right. 17. A mind that is by nature one and without parts cannot possess a threefold character. What's the threefold character? Threefold character. Remember, we're talking about Yogacara here, yeah?
Left or right or middle?
So the threefold character is Rob.
The natures?
Yeah, the three natures: imaginary, dependent, and ultimate.
Good.
Good.
Right
Right
on.
on.
Okay. So a mind that is by nature one and without parts cannot possess a threefold character. Self-awareness thus does not entail an object and an agent as real entities.
Isn't it more that those are the three full character, the perceiver, the perceived, and the perception?
Um,
Are you looking at the commentary? Does the commentary
no,
clarify?
sorry, I'm not looking at the commentary, but
I
um,
wouldn't be either. Yeah, I'll look at that and see. But anyway, keep going.
yeah, I mean, I was reading this as agent, object, and agent as real entities is the imagined nature, self-awareness as the dependent nature, and one and without parts as the perfected nature. Um, but maybe we can put this one to the side. Figure out what Mipam has to say about it. Because this, I'm on Sloka 18, because this is its very nature, and this, I believe, refers to self-awareness. Because self-awareness is its very nature, consciousness is apt for self-cognition. But how can consciousness cognize those things of nature foreign to itself? This is to say, if the mind, if consciousness is sort of the nature of the mind, if thoughts are the nature of the mind, how can the mind perceive non-consciousness, non-thoughts? How can the mind perceive physical things? How can the mind perceive matter? Um, this sort of sets up, let's keep going. On the next page, page 226, sloka 19, the nature of the mind is absent from non-mental things. How then could self-cognizing consciousness know other things? For you have said that known and knower are two different entities. I mean, this is the sort of classic Cartesian issue. How does the mind, how could the mind possibly know matter? Um, so this seems to set up an argument for representationalism, right? Which is what we see sort of in the Sautantrika, that the mind is not perceiving matter directly, that the mind is perceiving inner representation, or what is described as a mental aspect. Um, that what you see in front of you is not the Zoom screen, it's your mind, your mental recreation of the Zoom screen. Sort of appealing idea. According to the theory of the mental aspect, mind and object are in fact distinct. But since it's akin to a reflection, it's by such means that things may be experienced. Okay. For those who disallow that consciousness is modified by aspects of non-mental things, there can be no perception of external objects. So, this is saying that this argument about representationalism, all it does is kick the can. Actually, what it does is it sets for regress. So you say physical matter can't influence the mind. The mind can't perceive physical matter; it can only perceive a representation of that matter. Um, okay, but how does that representation of the matter get in the mind? Does it perceive matter? Well, no, we know that doesn't work. So maybe there's another step where another thing that then the aspect comes out of. And okay, how does that one perceive the matter? So yeah, a regress is set up. There's simply no way of getting matter into the mind that is satisfactory. Okay, we are sort of out of time, but we only have two more stanzas, so please bear with me. Since aspects are not different from the consciousness considered to be one, the aspects themselves cannot be manifold. Therefore, it cannot be said that it is through their powers that things are known. So, if mind is a single essence, consciousness is one thing, um, but the aspects, the contents of consciousness are diverse and varied and multifaceted. Um, Consciousness can't be one thing for the reasons that we have, discussed at length. One thing having many parts means that one thing is in fact many things. But since it is not separate, since consciousness is not separate from a manifold of aspects, consciousness itself cannot be one. If this is not the case, you must explain what you intend on saying these two are one. So the argument being really that attempting to establish mind and its content as either one thing or as separate things, neither of those things work. Therefore, the notion of mind is incomprehensible in it, or to say it another way, that the notion of mind does not withstand scrutiny. So that is Derek.
And that's a wrap. Is that right?
I think that's right.
Any comments, final comments, questions, conclusions, jokes?
Yeah, it's like it's all inconceivable, you know. There's nothing withstands scrutiny. Even like a basic train of thought is you know without logic and without uh, you know you can't grasp it. So the whole thing is in a sense miraculous, um, or inexplicable. Um, and
I don't know what you're talking about.
It comes back to
Yeah.
my bumper sticker. Shit happens, don't try to explain it.
On that note, let's conclude. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, and so forth. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the radiant wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Kiki Soso Ashe.
Ashe Lagya
Thank you,
Lama.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
When you get left hanging at the
Thank
end of every
you.
one of these,
Thank you,
you have
Chris.
to do something, right?
Thank you, everybody.
That's right. Good way to conclude. So next week we have Shnana Garba, a buddy of Shantarak Shittas. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Is
Chris.
he a teacher? Was that
I'm sorry. Oh,
was
is Shantarak Shittas teacher?
yeah,
I
was he?
can't remember. There's some relationship.
There's some relation.
We'll
Yeah,
have it
yeah,
for you by
he
next week.
was his teacher.
His grammar teacher, probably.
Grammar, grammar was a big deal, in over there.
Was?
Yeah, that stuff.
Is.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you. Thank you.